Hello everyone, welcome to Redmen TV. I'm delighted to tell you that this is a very special deep dive with former head of StatsBomb, Ted Knutson. If you don't know him and you're into football analytics, where have you been hiding for the last 15 years? But before we get into our conversation, I just want to let you know we've also done an Everything You Need to Know on Hugo Ekitike. That is out on Redmen Plus with Josh Williams in full right now. But here is Mr. Ted Knutson. Hello everyone, welcome to the Redmen TV and a very special deep dive episode today. If you are into football analytics in any way, shape or form, you will know who joins me on the show today, and that is Mr. Ted Knutson. Worked in football for a long time now, started out, I think I'm right in saying, at Pinnacle Sports in the betting side of things, and moved through, incorporated as a co-founder, StatsBomb, who were later bought out by Huddle, of course, the chief executive officer over there, and is now the chief executive officer of Variance Incorporated. Ted, I'm absolutely made up to get to have a football conversation with you. You are someone who I've wanted to talk football with for a long time, so thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me here. I did dabble inside of football teams as well with a little team called Brentford back when they came up from League One.
I've heard of them.
Yeah, and their sister team, Midtjylland, where we helped win a couple Danish titles. So, I
mean, the story around Midtjylland and obviously what football analytics was used for in Brentford is so sort of well versed, I suppose, now, isn't it? But I think of Midtjylland and I think of those long throw-ins and I think of Thomas Gronemark and I think of the links back to Liverpool in 2018 when he was brought in and stuff. And, you know, you can't help but, you know, I think for me it was always interesting to hear the stories around Midtjylland of where are they going to get their advantage and stuff. And I think Liverpool have been very good at sort of finding those marginal gains, for want of a better term. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts, obviously, on Ekitike over the next sort of 20 minutes, half an hour or something. So should we get into it then? I think... obviously, because of your work with StatsBomb, I'm sure you'll have come across Hugo Ekitike for a long time, probably back when he was playing at Reims. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, he was on a couple of scouting lists then, and he was an interesting prospect, quite thin at the time, and then had a stint at PSG, where PSG actually loves to like hype up their young kids so they can potentially sell them on to the next place. They actually gave a presentation at a StatsBomb conference, one of the first ones, around exactly this model. And then obviously he's been in the Bundesliga and has just in the last 12 months really started to succeed.
Mm-hmm. And so what is it? I mean, obviously, in terms of the freely available data, obviously I use a lot of FB ref and stuff like that. So in terms of his stats, he seems to show it really well there. But there is one that Liverpool fans all seem to be gravitating towards. And I can tell by the wry smile, it's his performance versus XG, isn't it, that people seem to be gripping onto at the moment? Is that something that Liverpool fans should be focusing on, or are we focusing on the wrong things, Ted?
Well, So he was about 3 goals under expected goals last season. Very good volume on shots, very good volume of expected goals. When we look back a couple of years, though, we see that he was like 4 goals over during one of his seasons at Reims. And so what you see is like over time, most of these things end up being approximately on what the model expects it to be. But on a seasonal basis, like it can vary. I know that there are some trauma wounds from Darwin, who I adore, by the way, partly because like I love the chaos factor that he brings to the game. But when we look at it, like there's nothing obvious there. And if you remember, I remember having this argument against Liverpool fans over and over again in the early seasons. Mohamed Salah was said to be a poor finisher back in the day when he first showed up.
Well, it's so interesting because we've noticed obviously the season by season variant. I think you were talking about the StatsBomb 3 under, weren't you there? I think
Correct.
In like FB ref and stuff like that, I think it was around about minus 5.3, if I'm right in saying.
StatsBomb's data is much better. We have where the goalkeeper is, we have where the defenders are. Like we put a lot more time and energy into making good data to create better expected goals.
No, I totally understand that, but I just thought I'd better mention that
Absolutely.
That won't be available on the free stuff. So what is it then that you are seeing in the numbers that makes you think, if you do, that this could be a good signing for Liverpool?
Well, if you wanted to bring up some of the slides, I prepped some of the information for everybody to be able to take a look at it, because I knew that it's easier to see in a visual way than to just have some grizzled nerd talking about it.
Okay. Well, we can bring that up right now, and we'll start off with the 90s played, I suppose, on the right-hand side. And this is a 22-year-old with 33 appearances, Ted.
Yeah, so what we're looking at is should be probably a striker radar. You can see like all the color on it. And when we look at those numbers, like 0.58 expected goals on the StatsBomb numbers, 97th percentile, almost 4 shots a game, which is actually great. One of the problems you see on the other red team sort of up in that area that I don't think I'm allowed to talk about on this podcast, but the ones that are terrible year after year, is that they have strikers that don't actually shoot very much. And Liverpool have gone the opposite way. We want strikers that shoot a bunch. And Darwin shoots a lot. And Ekitike this year has shot a lot as well. So that's pretty exciting. The other thing that's very, very noticeable is, shot quality is pretty good. But we look down kind of in the right corner there, and you'll see open play expected goals assisted. He had 7 assists last year up top, which is pretty unusual. And all of those were to different players, which is very unusual and very intriguing. You're like, he is able to keep his head up and not just find like one player, but he can find any number of players through the flow of the game.
So I'm looking at one in particular here, and I'm looking at dribble and carry as well in the 94th percentile there. And am I right in saying that a striker to be that high up in the dribbles and carries, that's not a normal trait for a striker? You might see that more from a forward who maybe plays on the wing, but is Ekitike slightly different to what we normally see as a number 9? Yeah,
he's one of the exciting type players that he has size about him in terms of height, but he's not too big yet. He's not fully filled out. Like if you put him next to some of the giants and the Herculean players in the Premier League right now, he'd look a little thin and wiry. But one of the things that he does is he's very good at moving, and he's good at moving through space, which is slightly unusual for most people in their 9s. Now, this could be a little bit of an element of this is what the Bundesliga affords, but you want players that are able to do that. And he is somebody that has done that year after year. So again, kind of ticking the boxes that says that he's not just a guy that's going to get the ball and shoot. He's a guy that can keep his head up, can create for the other weapons that Liverpool have, and is going to also be able to create his own shot at times as well.
And that's such an interesting thing. I'm just going to pull you back on that line that you've just said there. It's not just about him. And I think with Mohamed Salah at Liverpool, he's the incumbent guy. He's the guy who's been scoring the goals for such a long time now. Ekitike just turned 23 years old. Are you expecting him to come in and be the guy, or are you expecting him to maybe grow into that role and facilitate maybe Cody Gakpo or Luis Diaz, Florian Wirtz, Mohamed Salah?
So I think that that's actually an interesting point. If we fast forward on the slides that we've got to the big shot map that has Liverpool on it. So we've got all of Liverpool's shots on one of them, and then the follow-up slide is just looking at the goals. Start with the full shots. When we look at that map in particular, and I know that this is nerds and visualizations, but the color coding here is the quality of the shot or the expected goals on the shot. And then there are different triangles on here, which are through balls, which are super valuable. Liverpool love to create through balls. Some of these are shots off of dribbles on there, like circles are headers, right? And circles are not super valuable unless they're kind of effectively unmarked or off of set pieces. Anyway, the point around this is you look at the shot map and you know that Salah has been like the primary weapon, but the shot map is actually fairly balanced, which is intriguing. But when we go to the goals, if you look at the goal shot map, you see a different story. This is where the goals came from. You see all those triangles on the right-hand side there? Those are incredibly valuable, and those are all either Salah goals or goals that Salah created, and you see a very unbalanced map here. Mm-hmm. What Liverpool clearly would have done when they looked at their stats from this last season is say, we are heavily right-side balanced, which has been fine, but if we can rejig that a little bit and make sure that we've got both sides of the pitch covered and we're dangerous everywhere, that actually makes it easier for us to score goals. It makes it harder for teams to overweight Salah's side. Mm-hmm. And as long as you can get the passes over into that next zone with somebody that can continue to run, you're creating a much more dangerous situation against defenses.
Okay, and then if we take a look at Hugo Ekitike's then as well, correct. I take it you're going to then show us he's a bit more of an all-rounder looking at this shot map, and he doesn't mind drifting to the right, doesn't mind drifting to the left, and takes them from central. What I like, by the way, on this is a lot more 6-yard box shots than maybe Liverpool had last season.
There's a good amount of 6-yard box. There's also a good amount of triangles. So those are, again, the through balls. His goals are a little kind of right side weighted, but that's okay if you know that, teams are going to overcommit to Salah, and then you have him to be able there to finish the ball off if that ball comes through. But it's not just right side weighted. So he is able to play across the whole face of the goal, which is very useful.
Okay. And as you see Ekitike right now, is he one of those players that is maybe about to take a leap?
It's impossible to tell you one way or another. and as much as we want to be able to predict player performance, it's a thing that has, health involved. Sometimes it involves depression when they move. Sometimes it involves, oh my God, like everybody that I'm playing against is a physical monster and it's impossible to score all of a sudden. They've done everything they possibly could in order to make this a successful transfer. But now you kind of just have to see it, play out. Last year, Liverpool had center backs. When I watched them in person in a couple different games, I could not believe how physically awesome they were. Like, genuinely could not believe it. And they were healthy the whole time as well. If he had to face those Liverpool center backs every day, like, he would really struggle to score, as everybody in the league did. But against the breadth of the Premier League, like, I think he's got a good chance, and he's not necessarily done developing. So they get an extra possibility that he can do that. With good coaching, he can also add a couple of elements to his game too. So I think that as much as they could possibly do, they've done a very good job in the signing.
And what about, is there anything that we can learn from what he played like with Omar Marmoush to what he played like without Marmoush when he moved on to City?
We didn't see the numbers move that much, which I was surprised by. Marmoush was super dangerous. He actually overperformed his expected goals by a good bit in the first half of last year, probably in the second half too. Like, he scored some belters for City. But I think the good news is that he is very capable of playing with elite other attackers, and they complement their games, as opposed to, like, sometimes you get a striker that is such a ball hog or such a black hole that he isn't able to complement the other players around him.
And I'm thinking back now to when we signed Darwin Nunez, because Darwin Nunez, when we signed him, was billed as a shot magnet. I think if I'm correct, he was taking about 6 shots a game, maybe, in the Portuguese league. Obviously, it's around about just under 4, I think, from that first slide. Maybe it's 3.94 per game in the Bundesliga for Ekitike. And you mentioned it earlier. Are there any similarities there that you saw, or is Ekitike got more to his all-round game than perhaps Darwin did at the time?
I think he definitely has more with the ball at his feet. I think Darwin is a better physical specimen at the moment and was when he was signed. But also, I think it was a different group that signed Darwin. Like, I don't think that it was the current regime or kind of the stats-based regime. They might have shied off of that price a little bit. This price is very market-based, and Liverpool have been very, very aggressive in what they decided to spend this year. Fans have often beaten up FSG because they looked at, like, underinvestment in the squad. Like, there's none of that. And in fact, this is one of the most impressive examples of investing in a winning team and rebuilding a Premier League winning title team that I've ever seen.
Yeah, it's so strange as a Liverpool fan, to be honest, to sit here, Ted, and see the way that we're reacting now. One thing that I do think it is important to draw attention to at times is when we won the Premier League sort of 5 years ago, we were in COVID. Like, the for want of a better phrase, the arse had dropped out of football, and they were concerned about whether the money was going to be there, weren't they? And I wonder whether it's easy to look back now and say, but I just wonder whether Liverpool were going to do that at that time anyway. And they just never, because they didn't know what the revenues were going to look like.
I would say that it's because the team was quietly for sale.
Okay. Very interesting. Okay.
And they didn't sell, and they kept it, and they then rebuilt it and reinvested. So I think this is a new commitment from the ownership group, and people should be excited.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, then. So on to, obviously, we've talked about Ekitike, we've talked a little bit about Salah and stuff like that, but Wirtz and Ekitike, do you see this as a with the ball, without the ball, different sorts of formations? Are we going to see games where maybe Wirtz and Ekitike, or Wirtz and even Dominik Szoboszlai play up front together, maybe in big games, and Ekitike is just brought in slowly into the side? Or do you think that this guy's been brought in as a day one starter who will start probably ahead of Wirtz, and they have to form a sort of relationship on the pitch quickly?
I think Wirtz is a different player. I think he's going to be much more a facilitator. I think that they probably have a little bit of questions about how he plays in a defensive structure, but Liverpool have a ton of options in weaponry up front, basically across, the front five players. And Frimpong kind of counts too, because that dude's not a normal fullback. Like, he's not a right back in any traditional sense of the word. You've watched him in the friendlies early season, and he's well ahead of of Salah or the equivalent right wing forward on a regular basis. He's so fast that he creates those moments that he gets into space. But what that requires is, when he's doing that, like, they really have to adjust the defensive structure to compensate considerably versus the spaces that Trent occupied last year. And I don't think anybody has a clear bead on exactly what the squad's going to look like from a game-to-game formation set initially, including possibly Slotted this time. But I think that he's got so many options that, at least up front, they have depth and they have real talent in almost every single position.
Yeah, and I think that sort of depth is so integral, isn't it? Liverpool are going out there, you've already mentioned, we're attacking the transfer window and stuff like that. It's so frustrating as a fan sometimes. I just want to see it. I want to see it now. I don't want to see mean English friendlies anymore. I want to be able to dive into it, look at these games and start to analyse what the plan is, because I'm like, come on, just get rid of the pre-season. I want to see the Liverpool team first game of the season.
Just enjoy the fact that you're not exhausted like you are at the end of every season, and you're like, oh, it's so maybe you weren't last year because you won the title, but most seasons where you don't win the title, you're like, I'm so tired of football right now, I just need a break. So just take the break, appreciate it, know that it's going to be very, very good to watch when we get back into the season.
I tell you honestly, I was so tired from all the celebrating of 4 weeks at the end. I mean, we were out every weekend. There was 4 days on the bounce that we were out at the end of last season and stuff. So yeah, absolutely sensational end to the season, and it's been a really interesting transfer market. I'm not one for transfers, to be honest. I don't really get too excited about them or anything like that. But this season, I felt a lot differently, because it's just we've acted in a lot different manner and stuff. One of the things that I wanted to ask you about actually is this sort of trust that Liverpool have in Bundesliga players, Ted, and obviously with someone with your background, I'm sure you'll have some kind of formula to suggest what somebody would do if you take them from that league and put them into this league. Liverpool seem to trust Bundesliga players, though.
Yeah, I think that Bundesliga players tend to translate fairly well. Ligue 1 players are kind of hit and miss. Serie A players are much harder to predict, partly because they face often quite a bit older squads. And a lot of what you worry about is the physicality when you come to the Premier League now. Like, it is a tough league to initially hit the ground running. So can somebody physically handle the demands, and also defenders that are as strong or stronger than you are? So La Liga and Bundesliga are probably the two most comfortable places that the players translate from. The difference being, if players are consistently only transition players, you will get that in the Bundesliga, and it won't translate as well to the Premier League. Recently, this last year, there's been more transition in the Premier League, but it doesn't usually match up that way. La Liga is almost a one-to-one translation of players, as long as they can understand the language, which has historically been an occasional issue. Like, if you get a Spanish-speaking only player and they have a coach that cannot speak that, often there are things lost literally in translation.
Oh, it's so interesting, and therefore, what do you think? Obviously, this season alone, obviously, I know Frimpong speaks English, obviously, but played in the Bundesliga. Wirtz has played in the Bundesliga. Ekitike. What is it you think Liverpool are leaning into from those maybe 3 players that have come from the Bundesliga and looking for?
I think they thought that they had the best value and also the right age profiles. I think those are the 2 key things. And sometimes you have to wait a couple of years for the players that you'd like to come available, or for new players to show how good they are. Liverpool, what they didn't want to do was buy another set of 26 to 28-year-olds and put them on 4 or 5 year deals, because they tend to age relatively poorly in the last few years of those contracts. They wanted to find guys where throughout, basically, they could have a 5-year contract. They would still be on the right side of 30 at the end of that if they wanted to. So they could extend them for another year or 2, or to sell them if they needed to as well. They've been very careful about making sure that they have financial options as they go forward. And that's one thing that Edwards and crew have been exceptional at in the past, unlike Manchester United, who seem to be cap locked with average players on a regular basis and can't get rid of their chaff in order to reload.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And Ted, just to move on from the Liverpool stuff then, let's talk a little bit about what you're doing now in the sort of past and stuff. So I don't know what the best way round is, but I don't know, for anybody who maybe doesn't know your story, how did you get involved in football in the first place and to where you are today?
I was a professional sports bettor about 20 years ago, and then had to leave the country when the United States changed their laws and helped rebuild one of the world's largest offshore bookies. So I kind of was in and around gambling for about a decade. Then I went and worked for Matthew Benham on the football side at Brentford and Midtjylland, and basically helped run recruitment there, helped define what stats-based recruitment looked like. Came back out and I was looking for my next job, and I thought that we'd had pretty good success, but football hadn't changed yet. So I then started a company called StatsBomb, like looking for my next job. And that turned into a series of tools and then data that when I left it last year, we powered 300 football teams on the men's and women's side around the world, including Liverpool, including like 75% of the Premier League and a lot of the top Champions League teams, both for men and women, all the way down to like National League. So that sold last year. And then I was like, all right, I need something to occupy my time because I would get bored. And it was finally like somebody had taken the handcuffs off me and I could have opinions about football again without irritating every customer that we had. So I started a thing called The Transfer Flow. And we have a daily newsletter that analyzes the transfer rumors. We predicted Ekitike in May of this year, and we did a full analysis on it. There should be able to available in show notes, depending on where you are. We also did rebuilds for each of the big teams. We're going to do Newcastle next week if you happen to be a weird Newcastle and Liverpool fan watching this. And then I still do some gambling. And so I've got this other premium subscription. I returned about 78% of the bankroll last year betting on the Premier League, English Championship, and UEFA Champions League. And I kind of instruct people, some guidance on my own bets, but also how to become a smarter bettor, which I think most people can potentially use.
Okay. And so thinking about, obviously you work with Liverpool and StatsBomb and stuff like that. I think Liverpool have been held up in high regard over the last few years in how they have used data. I think everybody's got the data now, but it's how you interpret the data, I suppose, that maybe sets the good teams from the great teams apart. And what is it you've seen, obviously, in working with Liverpool that maybe suggests that they do this the right way?
It's not just that they accepted and adopted the data perspective quite a long time ago, but also that they've been able to get that down to the pitch level. And they'll listen to the coaches about what tactical needs they need in terms of types of players, but then they use all of their, accumulated wisdom in order to find them across many different places in the market. Now, they're not as diverse in who they sign as like a Brighton. Brighton seem to sign players from all over the world. Liverpool go for more sure bets because that's what they can do, and they have the budget to be able to do that. The other thing that Liverpool have been great at is listening to outside advice that sounds really smart and then adopting that for themselves. And the set pieces thing is probably the biggest thing that you've seen there. I don't know why they don't take long throws, and they weren't great at set pieces, at least in the first half of last year. But I suspect that was a regular topic of conversations and something that they wanted to push in the offseason.
Yeah, I did think about the sort of set pieces and stuff, and I for me, it always felt like, well, Slot's got to just implement what he wants to do on the pitch all the time first, and maybe that's a string that you add to your bow a little bit later on down, because it seems like something that would be quite an easy win for us maybe at this point. And finally, I suppose, Ted, before we go then, the Transfer Flow podcast, yes, very cool, listened to it before, but also you've started another podcast called Man Down, which I think is equally as important for anybody who's maybe watching.
Yeah, we actually were pushed by our Transfer Flow listeners. We've got our YouTube podcast and our audio podcast, the Transfer Flow podcast. But there was a point earlier this year where Patrick's a therapist in his actual job, and then his other half of his job is doing podcasts like you guys do. And people were like, we would love to hear actually successful men who have children, who clearly have had relationships, be able to talk about all the things that we don't talk about. And that can include male friendship. It can include dating apps, how to have hard conversations, self-confidence, self-worth, all of these things that are really useful to know as a person, but often you don't come to the ideas until you're like 30 and 40 years old. A lot of our audience like yours is, sort of men in their 20s to 50s. And they're like, we would love to hear more content like this so that we would have some people that, we are trustworthy, that we could even potentially look up to, just talk about their lives. And so that's what we started to do. And it's been slowly growing, and people every single week are like, hey, thanks for this content, because like I learned something from it and I actually put it into practice, or it made me think about myself in a much more healthy way. And it's nice to put some good into the world.
Absolutely. Okay, well, we'll put the links, of course, in the Transfer Flow podcast and the Man Down podcast in the links in the description of this one, Ted. But thank you so much for your time. It's been really interesting, really eye-opening. And just thank you again for joining us.
Where are Liverpool going to finish this year, sir? Where's your optimism at?
I am going to say first in the Premier League. I think a lot of what Liverpool's planning, to be honest, coming from the game against PSG. I think something stuck in Slot's mind there, where he thought these guys are fast. Liverpool are an experienced side, are a very good side, but to be able to compete with Europe's best, which we should be doing every single season, we need to get more speed on the transition into our side, because that's something that we lost. They reminded me of a 17-18 Liverpool side with Mane and Salah and Bobby Firmino and stuff, and I just wonder whether that's stuck in Slot's head and that's been just eating away at him all summer long and stuff. So that for me, but I think we should have a real good go at Europe. I do think we will. Depending on how they obviously react to the passing of Diogo Jota, I think that does impact the season. If they react in a way that's positive for the side, I think they can go on and win it again. But we're not what I think, Ted. What do you think?
Well, next week we're doing our outrights on the variance betting. I had Liverpool at 8-1 at last summer, so to win the title. This year, I think it's a three-way between Man City, Liverpool, and Arsenal for the Premier League. And I think Liverpool are basically second favorites in the Champions League. That's where I have them. I think that if you put this Liverpool team against Barcelona, I think Barcelona would have real problems with them.
Okay, and who have you got as the favourites then? Have you got Barcelona as the favourites, or is it PSG?
No, I think PSG are the favourites. I think Barcelona are probably third, fourth. And then like someone like Arsenal and City are going to be right there as well. Like the Champions League is very diverse and very fun to watch.
Absolutely. Okay, well, Ted, thank you so much for that. We'll check you out on the Transfer Flow and on Man Down, of course. And we'll see you next time on the Redmen TV.